Welcome to the fourth and final presentation in our monthly speaker series, and thank you all for coming. I just wanted to introduce Climate Action Sarnia Lambton. I refer to it as CASTLE myself, just say CASTLE, to everyone before bringing our esteemed speaker to the stage. We are a diverse group of local citizens concerned about the impact of human-caused climate change on the well-being of our only home, planet Earth. We held our inaugural rally at City Hall that attracted well over 100 people, many of whom signed on as members and supporters. In the before times, 2019, we were instrumental in getting City Council to invoke a climate emergency brought forward by Councillor Brian White, who happens to be here this evening. Thank you for coming, Brian. We are your biggest fans. Since then, the city has developed a climate change action plan, and CASTLE continues to monitor what our leaders are doing or not doing in some cases. Since the pandemic, we've continued to remain active and have held several tree planting initiatives at various city parks. This has been done with the support of the Parks and Recreation Department, and we've received a number of generous grants from local organizations to fund our efforts. If you'd like to join us or you want more information, just see me before you leave, and we'll add you to the mailing list. Also, I'd like to thank New Sarnia Foundation for sponsoring this evening's event. Our monthly series has been designed to allow us to become empowered as individuals and as a community to make positive contributions to address the climate crisis and the associated biodiversity crisis. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement. With respect, we honor the long history of the many First Nations people on this land. Tonight, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe peoples, including the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. May we commit to work together in solidarity towards reconciliation, truth, and understanding as we strive to fulfill our responsibilities and obligations to care for our home, Mother Earth, and all her beings. As this land acknowledgement states, we all need to work together. The Indigenous peoples have much they can teach the rest of us, and ultimately we need to develop a culture in which the land is respected and protected by everyone. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker tonight. Tonight's presenter is a Sarnia native who, after having lived in many places as diverse as Australia, Vancouver, and Toronto, has returned to the beautiful beaches of Lake Huron to raise her two boys. Tristan has always enjoyed the beauty of the cities she's lived in through walking, cycling, kayaking, hiking, and snowshoeing, and wants to encourage others in Sarnia to experience the same. Professionally, she has worked with many cycling events and organizations such as the Ride to Conquer Cancer, Hero Ride, Great Cycle Challenge, and has sat on the committee for Sarnia's very own Blue Water International Grand Fondo. A large portion of her professional career was as a project manager for TED Talks, I'm sure you're all familiar with, which has allowed Tristan to travel to many countries and visit many walkable, vibrant cities. It is these experiences that she still draws inspiration from when imagining Sarnia's potential. Please welcome Tristan Bassett.
Got all the keys to she's properly. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming here today. My intention was to keep this very short and sweet, but then I got really into writing this, so I hope that it's not too long, but everybody takes a little bit of something away from it. So I first just wanted to start by thanking Climate Action Sarnia Lambton for inviting me to speak here tonight. It really is an honor to be included in a collaborative project like this for our community. They've done a lot of hard work behind the scenes to bring these presentations to life. They do a great job advocating for environmental solutions in our community, and they're a very active working group with lots of upcoming projects. So if you're not already involved with them, I encourage you to do so. As mentioned, my name is Tristan Bassett. I am the Executive Director of New Sarnia Foundation, and I'm excited to be here to present to you all. If you're here tonight, then I'm going to assume that you're interested in either climate change and the environment or active transportation. And tonight I hope to create a connection between the two and bring some awareness of how human-powered movement, such as walking, cycling, or wheeling, can immediately create a powerful impact in the global climate crisis. So most of us here are at the very least loosely aware of the climate crisis that we're facing. To summarize the gravest concern, the average global temperature has now risen by 1.1 degrees Celsius. And but when the temperature continues to rise, the consequences will be extreme. To paint the picture of our future, an increase of just 2 degrees Celsius by 2050 threatens to place 1.3 billion people at risk and destroy 158 trillion US dollars in assets, which is double the annual productive output of the world, meaning there's very little way we could recover from that. This is all due to climate change-related natural disasters such as extreme heat, flooding, food and water scarcity. So that's with a 2-degree increase over the next 30 years or so. With current policies, we are heading for a 3.7 degrees Celsius increase by 2100, so certainly not heading in the right direction. We've got to slow this train down. Even if we cut our carbon emissions in half right now, we can still only slow the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees by 2030, which would certainly still have devastating outcomes. I do realize that I'm starting this presentation with a lot of doom and gloom, but I think we've got to open our eyes to just how dire this situation really is. Cities like Sarnia are a key contributor to climate change. Cities are responsible for 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. They will also bear the brunt of the climate crisis effects, and to a large extent, we're already doing so. Cities, as opposed to rural areas, are most vulnerable to climate change, but this also represents a tremendous opportunity. By adapting cities, climate risks can be addressed and vulnerable lives and assets protected. This image was taken from Sarnia's Climate Change Action Plan and implementation strategy, and it illustrates an understanding of our local role in the climate crisis. In response to this emergency, cities around the world are already implementing ambitious actions to reduce their emissions alongside efforts to increase their climate resilience. In 2019, Sarnia declared a climate emergency and has outlined key areas of focus with a claim that resiliency is the top priority. We're very appreciative that the City of Sarnia has invested resources and efforts into this plan, and we feel that these efforts can be complemented by members of the community like you and I. So what is New Sarnia's foundation role in all of this? We know that Sarnia is a great community. We've got many residents who feel a deep sense of commitment to their neighborhoods and are actively involved in many activities to improve the quality of life here. We've got lots of fantastic service clubs, many community events that are organized solely by volunteers, and many different special events, special interest groups, and ways to get involved in making Sarnia a great place to live. New Sarnia Foundation is a community organization made up of active, dedicated, and passionate residents committed to making Sarnia a healthier, more active, and socially connected place to live. We recognize that the most significant way we can achieve these goals is to advocate for walkable, livable neighborhoods. We hope to spread awareness and education as to how human-powered movement, such as walking and cycling, can help address a wide range of social and environmental challenges. We're committed to making the future of Sarnia a better place to live. But before we move forward, let's take a look backwards. You're looking at a picture of Sarnia in 1955. It gives a clear picture of a typical city around that time. The streets are filled with people walking to work, shopping at the market, seeing familiar and friendly faces in passing. It's not uncommon to see kids out biking down the street or walking to the store on their own. Historically, Sarnia was designed to be walkable, with compact, densely populated neighborhoods and a mix of residential, commercial, and industrial areas. Pedestrians would walk or cycle safely without the need to remain vigilant of car traffic. Every neighborhood would have a school, grocery stores, and other basic amenities within a walkable distance. Residents on their daily routes would regularly encounter and interact with their neighbors. People in this old world lived healthier, more social lives. By the turn of the 20th century, with the introduction of Henry Ford's affordably priced Model T, the automobile began to gain acceptance. Enthusiasts touted the car as a practical, reliable means of conveyance that made scores of places more accessible, and that would change the pattern and the quality of city transportation for the better. This, of course, had a profound effect on the design of cities as guidelines were altered to accommodate all of these new vehicles. City planners and architects believed that cars would be the primary mode of transportation, so they designed cities to accommodate this new reality. Roads were widened and streets were altered to accommodate the increased number of vehicles. With large parking lots and parking garages being built to provide ample parking for residents and visitors, highways were also built through urban areas, creating barriers that separated neighborhoods and made it difficult for people to walk or bike. Pedestrian-friendly design elements such as sidewalks and crosswalks were often overlooked. By the 1940s, with the rise of popularity of cars, walking and cycling had become increasingly unsafe in our city. This in turn led to a significant increase in urban sprawl as people moved out of the urban cities to escape the congestion and the pollution caused by cars. More roads and highways were built, oftentimes destroying or dislocating neighborhoods and endangering plant and wildlife. The result? Driving everywhere has become a common practice in Sarnia, and I'm sure we all have an idea of how this trend has had a negative effect on our environment. From the manufacturing process to the junkyard, cars consume resources, pollute the air, land, and water, and transform space. The building of automobiles requires gathering vast quantities of metals, gas, plastics, rubbers, and other materials. Once on the road, cars are the prime consumers of oil and gas, stimulating an increased drilling, transporting, and refining of petroleum products to meet the rising demand. Once derelict or scrapped vehicles pile up when automobiles end their productive lives. The good news is that steel and iron can be recycled, but many other waste products are left behind, such as the heavy metal from batteries, plastics, glass, antifreeze, motor oil, transmission, and brake fluid, and I could go on. While our car-centric lifestyle clearly negatively impacts our environment, it also creates other widespread challenges in our community. When cities became designed around cars, our society became less social. Car-centric cities like Sarnia have higher rates of social isolation in many of our demographic segments. Nicknamed the backseat generation, our children don't have the freedom in their neighborhoods like they used to. So many are at home, alone, increasingly relying on technology for entertainment versus real-life outdoor play with their friends. Parents play the role of chauffeur, driving their kids to and from sports and activities. Car-centered streets make it also much more difficult for the elderly or people without vehicles to get around, making socializing and maintaining relationships and friendships much more difficult. Many of our elderly community members live in areas that don't have sidewalks or safe crossings, and people are fearful to make their way around our city. For those who don't have access to a personal vehicle, this can limit access to employment opportunities, social services, the hospital, healthcare, and other community resources. It would be ideal to be able to rely on public transit, but unfortunately, it's not really a reality here in Sarnia just yet. Having to rely on a vehicle to get around the city negatively affects the poorest and most vulnerable members of our society. Increased car traffic has affected our health in dramatic ways. Exposure to vehicle exhaust emissions can cause cardiovascular, pulmonary, respiratory diseases, and several other negative health impacts. Car pollution has been linked to childhood cancers, and there's a heavy correlation between car usage and obesity. This shouldn't be too surprising, as we've replaced the primary form of exercise throughout all of human history, the act of getting from point A to B, with mostly sitting in a seat. So now what? What do we do? Now that we know that climate change is a reality rather than a mere prediction, and we know that the transportation industry is a leading contributor to this crisis, what can we do? To support real climate action, we need to pursue some aggressive goals. We need to rethink the role of cars sitting in our driveway and revisit that age-old idea of walking and cycling as main forms of urban transport. Walking, cycling, wheeling, any of these human-powered forms of travel that don't require a vehicle are often referred to as sustainable mobility, and for good reason. Shifting short car trips to active travel modes will be one part of the climate solution, and more people of all ages and abilities should be encouraged to make trips of 3 kilometers or less by bicycle or walking, and to feel safe and comfortable to do so in our city. Now, as a full disclaimer, yes, I drive a vehicle. We're a 2-vehicle household. This kind of sounds like an anti-car presentation, but it's not. I'm not trying to lay a guilt trip on anybody who drove here tonight or drives regularly, but what I do hope to do is to plant a seed of change of thinking that perhaps cars aren't needed for every single trip that we make, especially these shorter ones. I will still always choose my car to lug around my son's hockey equipment or do my weekly large grocery trips, but I'm hoping to encourage you to take a look at those shorter, quicker, and easier trips and see if we can begin to convert some of those. So I'm going to assume that most of the people here tonight probably live in Sarnia. Looking at this map and thinking about the places that you travel daily, work, school, groceries, sports, which would most of your destinations be within 3.5 kilometers of your home? This radius is a 5-kilometer radius from the red circle there. For me, the furthest distance I travel on a regular basis is from my home to the New Sarnia office. It's 5 kilometers. My son's school is 1 kilometer, and my nearest grocery store is 1.5 kilometers. I don't actually travel many places on a daily basis in Sarnia that are further than 5 kilometers. Once I actually started to map out some of the places I get in my vehicle and head to, I started to realize how short my trips actually were. This past year, New Sarnia surveyed 110 Sarnia residents, and the results show that more than half of all trips are less than 5 kilometers from our homes. These short travel trips are the ones we hope to convert into walking or cycling. Sarnia is relatively flat. Our climate is fairly moderate year-round. Yes, it takes a bit more time in planning, but the reward is absolutely worth the investment. So my call to action, my request of you here tonight, is to work with us and pledge to walk or bike a short 3-kilometer trip once this upcoming week. I feel like this would have been better received had we have done this presentation last week when the weather was 27 degrees and sunny. But trust me, we can all do it. Rain, shine, snow, sleet, it's still very enjoyable. Think about your shortest trip that you make on a regular basis, a run to the corner store for milk, a quick drive to the post office, picking the kids up from school or daycare. Can you squeeze an extra 10 to 15 minutes out of your day to choose walking or cycling for one of these short trips instead of driving? But will just once a week seriously make a difference, you ask? The answer is yes, and quite significantly. Studies have shown that cycling just 4 kilometers and back, so about 15 minutes spent on the bike instead of driving, saves 1.1 kilogram of carbon dioxide per day. A European study followed 2,000 urban residents over time, and they found that those who switched just one of their trips per day from car driving to cycling reduced their carbon footprint by about 0.5 ton over a year, or the equivalent emissions of a one-way flight from London to New York. So even if not all of our car trips could be substituted by bicycle trips, our personal potential for decreasing emissions is huge. We have vehicles for a reason. They're convenient, fast modes of travel. But if we can try to be open to the idea that perhaps we're overusing them, we can make small, incremental change one trip at a time. Remember when I said we needed to cut our carbon emissions in half in order to slow the Earth's temperature? Well, an increase in about 20% of cycling could cut carbon dioxide emissions by nearly 11%. So if there's 50 of us in this room and only 20 of us started to substitute one trip per day by walking or biking, we can still make a real tangible impact immediately, right here in our own city. By switching to cycling or walking a short trip once per week, you'll reduce carbon emissions and you'll also experience many of the other benefits cycling and walking can bring to your physical health, mental health, and social well-being. The experience of walking and cycling for active travel is a contagious one. Once you feel the sense of freedom, the sense of being embedded and more connected to your neighborhoods, the ability to incorporate exercise into your day without having to dedicate specific time to pack up and head to the gym, I promise you'll be hooked. As a mom of 2 young boys, biking to work gives me a rare opportunity for peace and quiet where I can clear my head, and it just doesn't feel the same when I drive in my car. I can fit some movement into my day, and I swear I always come up with the best ideas riding my bike to and from the office. And then that first time you show up to a meeting by bicycle and all of your colleagues think, why don't I do that? I could do that. When we each make a choice to change our behavior, it can encourage those around us to change theirs as well. When all of us in this room commit to one 3-kilometer trip next week, it'll create a ripple effect with those around you. And that's how we will begin to change the culture of sustainable mobility in Sarnia. When I lived in Vancouver, cycling everywhere was much more commonplace. It was no question that I would cycle the 12 kilometers to my office and back. My husband skateboarded to work because his office was only a few blocks away from home. We had 2 cars and we barely drove. Parking was hard to find and expensive, traffic was a nightmare, so cycling was just much easier and much more enjoyable. We don't have many of those issues here in Sarnia. We don't have rush hour traffic or really any traffic congestion at all, and most of the parking in the city is free. Sarnia is a very easy place to drive everywhere. But just because we don't have those barriers doesn't mean we can't make the change and enjoy the many benefits of sustainable mobility. Active travel is beneficial for your own physical health. This one is very obvious and one of the most common reasons people choose to walk or cycle. Active commuting, namely traveling to work by walking or cycling, has been recommended as a practical way of incorporating more physical activity into daily life, especially for people who find prioritizing exercise difficult, like me. For me, my drive to work is about 12 minutes. My bike to work is about 20 minutes. So I can get 40 minutes of exercise on a day that there's a very little chance I would make it to the gym or squeeze a workout in at home. There's a very strong association between cycling to work and health outcomes. King's College in London compared more than 2,400 identical twins and found those who did the equivalent of just 3 45-minute rides a week were 9 years biologically younger, even after discounting other influences such as BMI and smoking. Those who cycle to work compared to those commuting by car or public transit are at significantly lower risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, and cancer-related mortality is 30% lower among bike commuters. It's good for business. People who cycle for 30 minutes 5 days a week take about half as many sick days as those who don't exercise. Those who walk or cycle to work have better self-reported work performance than public transport or car commuters. This can be explained by the proven positive effects of physical activity on brain function and cognition, which are closely related to performance. I would assume these findings would also translate to children and school performance as well. Social connection is a huge benefit, an overlooked benefit of walking and cycling in our city. When children are outside riding in their neighborhoods or going to school, when you're out on your street, you're more socially connected to your neighbors, people you frequently pass, and the shops and storefronts along your way. When we get into our car to drive to work, we're traveling through town in our own isolated box. When we get out of our car at work, the only people we interact with are our coworkers, and when we return home, the only people we interact with are our family. The possibility of random encounters with strangers is still there when we visit, say, the grocery store, for example, but we've reduced this window to occur from an everyday experience to a couple hours on the weekend. And we have to wonder if not having those small everyday interactions with strangers has a greater psychological effect on us than we realize. Cycling is one of the most effective treatments for stress, and in many cases has been proven to be as effective as medication, if not more so. 2/3 of Dutch residents aged 18 and older associated cycling with joy, and that people who walk or cycle to work tend to be more satisfied, less stressed, more relaxed, and experience greater freedom compared to people who drive their cars to work. If you're new to the notion of active transportation or walking and cycling in our city, there are many ways to participate at every age and a stage of ability and confidence level. It can be a big leap to ask someone to ditch their vehicle and ride their bike on a busy city street. We're very lucky to live in such a beautiful city, surrounded by nature, secluded trails, and off-the-road paths that I would recommend to anyone who's just getting started with walking and cycling. Getting started recreationally on the weekends or with family is a great way to get comfortable with the rules of the road and foster a love of walking, cycling, or wheeling. We also have a great network of quiet, bike-friendly side streets that allow riders to choose lower stress roads with less vehicle and noise to discover their own routes throughout the city. A lot of our roads have dedicated bike lanes, but I rarely ride on the main roads, and I have many bike the back road routes I take on a regular basis. The more people choose to walk or cycle for recreation or leisure, the more likely they'll be to choose it as a mode of transportation to get to school or work or run their errands. There are many ways to incorporate cycling and walking into children's routines. If you haven't already seen the viral TikTok video of Coach Balto's bike bus, you've got to check it out. It gave me goosebumps the first time I saw it. It's such a great initiative for these kids, and I'd love to see something like this in our city. For families with young children, walking or cycling to and from school is one of the easiest and most fun ways to incorporate active transportation into their schedule. The more of us who walk our kids to school, the less cars there will be at drop-off and pickup, so the safer the school streets become. For young kids, it's a great way to spend quality time with a caregiver away from screens and technology and explore nature along the way. For older kids, walking or cycling to school with friends gives them a much-needed sense of independence and social time. There are many supportive programs like Walk to School Week, Ride to School Week, led by Ontario Active School Travel, and I'd encourage you, if you have children or grandchildren, to reach out to their school and encourage the schools to participate. Many schools in our city aren't offering the same road safety courses we had as children, so unfortunately our next generation isn't as confident with the rules of the road, and we would love for schools to begin incorporating these initiatives again. There's also an app called 123hop.ca that is a great way to introduce these topics with kids at home if they're not learning it in school, and there's a little step count challenge game that they can do with their classmates or their friends. New Sarnia is a proud sponsor of the Youth Spokes program here in Sarnia. It's free and open to all between ages 11 and 14 years old. The program aims to provide more opportunities for youth to get active by creating the foundation for a youth cycling community in Sarnia. Volunteer leaders help to teach road safety skills, helping to develop self-confidence and self-reliance, and allow youth to experience the freedom granted by a bicycle and the integration of healthy activity into everyday life. For adults, there are many community-led walking and cycling programs to get involved with, and no shortage of apps to use to track your goals, start challenges with friends, or see other people's routes throughout our city. Blue Water Trails is a great resource. Their website includes a map of all of our trails and some upcoming events. This City of Sarnia also has a great resource for cycling tips, road safety rules, and ways to get started. At New Sarnia, we've just opened up our own small group bike tours, and I would encourage you all to join one at our upcoming dates. Our co-founder, Ben Prinz, has been leading his small group bike tours for many private groups, and this June we are opening them up for public registration. There's no cost, and we provide the bikes. The bike tours aren't a race at all. They're a comfortable pace throughout the city, along trails, multi-use paths, and city streets. The photo on this slide is from a group tour that we did last summer, and it truly is a great way to experience cycling in our city, especially for those who are unsure of how to get around, what routes to take, or they just don't feel safe doing it alone and would like a bit of guidance. Or for anybody who enjoys meeting like-minded people who are into making Sarnia a better cycling city. We are running 3 public bike tours, June 7th, 8th, and 9th. Registration will be capped at 10 people per tour to keep them small. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to register at the website on the slide. We also have the Grand Fondo Slow Roll that New Sarnia is a proud sponsor of, coming up on June 4th. If you didn't participate in Slow Roll last year, it is a fantastic event. It's a large community bike ride. Again, it's not a race, but a slow cruise around the city to enjoy a leisurely ride. The route is about 10 kilometers. It's also free to register, and it's for all ages and ability, and a really fun event dedicated to contributing the growth of cycling culture in Sarnia. Both of these 2 events that I've just mentioned are part of the larger Big Bike Week that will be happening June 2nd to 9th, and more details will come out soon for all of the events included. For the aging population, Cycling Without Age is a relatively new program to come to Sarnia where residents of retirement homes are taken on a trishaw out on rides through the city, helping to provide access to the outdoors and reconnecting residents to the community. This is a very popular program and it will be expanding this year. Age-friendly Sarnia Lambton website is a great resource for cycling in the city, as well as information on conservation areas and trails. We have many off-road, lower stress areas to walk and cycle: the Howard Watson Trail, the waterfront at Centennial Park, Canatera Park, and many more. I'm sure there are many resources and community events and programs that I haven't mentioned, but this just gives you a general idea of how much is available for someone who's interested in dipping their toes into active transportation. You're not alone. There's a whole community of people right here in your own backyard eager to support you. While all of these events and programs are absolutely inspiring and a great place to start, we also understand that safety is a serious concern and often a barrier for people to walk or cycle in our city. Road design and urban planning has an extraordinary impact on how safe, comfortable, and attractive it is to travel by foot and bike, and therefore plays a central role in the promotion of active travel. We have nowhere near the safe infrastructure that other cities do, and we're only recently starting to prioritize safe spaces for our non-motorists. For the role of City Hall, the city staff and our elected officials, encouraging walking and cycling and creating a culture of sustainable mobility requires more than just painting a white stripe on the side of the road. To truly address climate change and build a growing culture of active transportation, we need to rethink how our city is built. Adding not only cycle paths or crosswalks, but incorporating things like tree shade, places to stop and rest, urban density versus suburban sprawl, these are all factors that must be considered in order to reshape our city. Every decision we make about our built environment, however small, is an opportunity to deliver better places for people to live. Things start to look very different when we prioritize people again over vehicles. Looking at these photos, which city do you think people feel more welcomed in, or where people feel relaxed with things to do and see, access to clean air, and a sense of safety? Yes, bike paths are great, but look at all of the additional elements of shade and shelter, the reduction in noise, places to stop and rest. This type of people-centered urban planning is one that encourages people to get out of their vehicle and start to explore their community. Neighborhoods with dense development, high street connectivity, and access to transit opportunities like the one in the photo below will produce up to 25% less energy from motorized vehicles compared to those areas built without active transportation in mind. And these don't always have to mean years-long, large-scale, big-budget capital projects like the Waterfront Master Plan or the Germain Park Master Plan. Even small, temporary, and relatively inexpensive projects can show significant improvement in how we interact with our city. Neighbors can come together, decide what their own neighborhood needs, what would make it feel safer or more enjoyable, and take action to make that happen in a small-scale, easy-to-implement way that can be built upon over and over again, and that is what New Sarnia is all about. When we installed our temporary protected bike lane last summer on Colburn Road, this was a completely volunteer-led neighborhood initiative. I live in this area, and a few of us were talking about how the bike lanes on Colburn are great, but we still won't let our kids ride on them. To me, that's kind of the marker of whether or not we're getting it right. Will I let my kids use this space? And it's a shame because it's the main access to 2 neighborhood schools, our only convenience store, the Tim Hortons, and many areas that are frequently visited by kids. So we set out to demonstrate how a quite simple enhancement of adding physical barriers to bike lanes can increase the sense of safety and therefore increase ridership. The barriers prove to reduce traffic by an average of 7 kilometers per hour, which definitely makes the street a safer place for all. 93% of people said they felt safer riding in the protected bike lanes versus the unprotected white line only lanes. 95% said they'd be more likely to allow their children to ride with them in these lanes versus the standard ones. And 88% of people said that they would bike more in our city if we had more bike lanes with this type of an infrastructure. Our project was intended to be temporary, but it provided many people an opportunity to experience what could encourage them to ride more. Something as simple and cost-effective as plastic barriers would prove to make a significant increase in the amount of cyclists we see in our city, and we hope to use these neighborhood-led projects to encourage the city to take the steps and make these improvements for us all. Speaking of the city, this is a very timely presentation as we're in the prime position to get involved in what the future of active travel looks like here in Sarnia. The city has recently committed to developing an active transportation master plan in order to develop a framework for an infrastructure network that will allow walking and cycling to become safe, convenient, and reliable methods of transportation for all ages and abilities, and ultimately create a livable and sustainable city. They are in the very early stages of development with the plan expected to be finished by 2024. If any of this presentation has piqued your interest in active travel, and I hope that it has, I would encourage you all to participate and to continue to participate throughout the public engagement process. Currently, there's a short survey available for the public to provide insight on their experiences with walking and cycling in Sarnia. In addition to the survey, there is a map tool that allows residents to specifically pin areas where they've had a negative or a positive experience while walking or cycling, or offer suggestions for improvement that would affect you personally. You can comment on areas that are in need of sidewalks, off-road trails, crosswalks, cycling lanes, etc. Areas that you would consider dangerous to walk or bike on a regular basis. For example, getting to the mall, the route you would take your kids to school. This is a great tool to use as you begin to explore your new 3-kilometer active trips, being able to pinpoint what personally affects you along your journey and what you'd like to see to make these 3-kilometer trips easy and more enjoyable. This survey closes next week. The original deadline was April 14th, but I asked them to extend it so I could include it in this presentation, which they kindly agreed to do, so I really encourage you all to participate. The new deadline is April 21st next week. The consultants for the master plan will be back in town mid-May hosting a series of public engagement opportunities, so keep your eye on the City of Sarnia Communications or join our mailing list where we also provide information on their events as well. As mentioned, we have a lot of great events coming up. One I have not mentioned yet, but we've created a short documentary with the production company Tomorrow Media here in town. The documentary does a great job describing what New Sarnia is all about, and we're excited to do a premiere screening of that at Maud's Variety in Mitten Village on May 18th. We'll be taking over the back parking lot, creating a fun pop-up park with music, lots of local businesses, good food, good company. So if you're interested in attending, this is your exclusive invitation. Please leave your email address on the sign-up sheet at the front, or you can email me at the email address on the slide. I just ask that you RSVP as we're hoping to get a good idea of numbers in order to help us plan. We also have, as I mentioned, Big Bike Week coming up June 2nd to 9th with some community events, so stay tuned for that as well. Oh, slow roll. Bike tours. You can email me for more information about any of these events or upcoming projects if you'd like to be more involved in what we're doing, or if you'd just like to chat. If you have an idea about how to make your neighborhood or your street a better place to live, we want to hear about it, and we want to help bring it to life. Yes, a huge part of our work is advocating to the city and councilors at City Hall, but we are all about small incremental change, doing what we can with what we have right now, and over time, if we make these small changes over and over again, we as residents can create big impact. We love welcoming people in our office. We've got great coffee. There's never a shortage of great conversation. So please, if you're interested in what we're doing, reach out and connect. We'd love to have you join our growing community of passionate residents working to make a change for the City of Sarnia. As I mentioned, if you want to stay connected with us, you can fill out your email address at the registration table in the front hallway. We use emails to communicate our upcoming projects, topics that require advocacy at City Hall, and invite our community to events. You can also join our private Facebook group where we have more in-depth conversation about these types of things. Again, thank you so much for having me tonight. On behalf of all of us at New Sarnia Foundation, thank you for supporting our mission to make Sarnia a healthier, more active, and socially connected place to live.